Hello everyone, this is Alex, and today we are talking about creative tempo changes. Creative tempo changes is just a fancy word that I use to talk about a technique or an approach to tempo change that can help you to create coherent tempo changes. Have you ever felt like you don't know at all what you're doing with tempo? That once the tempo is set in a song, you're scared to touch it, or you don't know how to change it? Like, do you really need to change it? That's the first question. Maybe certain styles of music have their own tempo for the whole track, and it's quite important for that specific style of music. But in some other styles, maybe tempo change are more common. Maybe we can have one or two, or maybe we can have even more than that. So what if I told you that you can have tons of tempo changes that feel coherent and that can help you shape your piece even more? Or maybe you're just looking to do one or two tempo changes through the whole song, and you're looking for ways to do it a way that feels right. So most of the music we hear nowadays only use one or two tempo, and even some of the most advanced niche progressive rock and metal bands only use a few and instead relies on other parameters to create interesting music. Well, in my opinion, when we're talking about bands, this may have something to do with the playability of a song. Of course, we have a long history of bands trying to play music live and trying to play it right. And of course, too many tempo changes can make this goal a little bit difficult, right? In classical music, we have conductors, and there's plenty of examples of very complex tempo changes through a piece of classical music, and even more in the modern and contemporary repertoire of the 20th and the 21st century. But there's something new that bands have been using more and more in the past 15 years, and that is pretty much a standard now in the industry of live shows, is a click track. We use click tracks for everything because we have playbacks, we have visuals that are lined up, we have lighting that are lined up with our show. So everybody is playing with a click, and the click is just like the perfect conductor, like too perfect, some would say, because it's not necessarily natural, but whatever, that's another debate. But I'm making this video specifically because there's more and more click tracks around, and this opens a wide array of possibilities for us to create more and more complex tempo tracks. But that's my progressive metal and classical contemporary composer's mind talking. What I'm talking about, creative tempo changes, can be applied to other types of music. It can be applied to film music. It can be applied to just a few tempo changes, like I said, in a pop song, for instance. So I think this is still relevant for everyone. So what is creative tempo changes? So to give you a reference, you probably heard the expression of playing half-time or double time. This means that we transform the quarter note to an eighth note or vice versa. It's just a common way for musicians to say that we don't count at the quarter note, but suddenly at the eighth note, or vice versa. In this scenario, if your tempo is at 100 beats per minute, then if you double it, you're suddenly at 200 beats per minute. So it's an increase of 100% of the speed. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever seen that in a score, but there's plenty of examples of that in classical music. Now, with that in mind, creative tempo changes, what is it exactly? It comes from this idea, but applied to tuplets. So one commonly used creative tempo change using tuplets is when we use triplets as a reference. So half-time or double time, we also have this little symbol here. And it just means that the 8-note triplet from the first tempo becomes the 8th note for the second tempo. So the triplets here becomes becomes 8th note on the second tempo. So this means that we have an increase of speed for the tempo of 50%. This can be useful if in your piece you're in the passage in triplet and you want to keep the feeling of the triplet, the speed of the triplet, but you don't necessarily want only group of 3 because you're stuck when you're playing triplet to play groups of 3 all the time. So maybe you want to do a group of 9 and then a group of 8 and then back to a group of 9. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this little creative tempo change through triplets allows you to create a reference tempo change. Because maybe you can be and the next section of the piece can be this way. So this is a creative tempo change because you use the previous tempo or a value from the previous tempo to create the new tempo. This creates a reference tempo change as opposed to a free tempo change. A free tempo change would have no reference at all with the previous tempo. Free tempo changes are not bad, but I think that a reference tempo change, like the creative tempo changes that I'm talking about now, can help you to create something more coherent, maybe have you make some better tempo change choices. But before we go further, it's important to know how to calculate the new tempo based on the first one. So for instance, in this example, we have triplets. We go from triplets to 8 notes. So let's say, for instance, our first BPM was 100 BPM. We divide 100 by 2, which gives us 50. And then we multiply it by 3, which is the triplet, which brings us to 150 BPM, which gives us our increase of 50% of speed. Of course, I'm taking this again a little bit further as a contemporary classical composer, and also with my progressive metal band Chronochromy, I'm bringing this even further. What you can do is not only use triplets, but use quintuplets, septuplets, nuptuplets, that's 9, right? And use these values as a reference for the new tempo. So maybe your quintuplets can become your new 16 notes. You see, it's only a small difference in the tempo, but there's still a link with it. It's the 16 notes, which are the same. But maybe if you have a drum, your hi-hat can change at this time, and your drummer can follow this if he or she can. I know my drummer hates me, but he's actually my brother, so he doesn't have a choice. So if we calculate this, maybe again from the first tempo, 100 BPM, and there's the quintuplets as a reference note, going to the 16 notes, which are a group of 4. We do 100 divided by 4, multiplied by 5, which gives us 125 BPM. So it's easy, right? It's scary, I know, but it works. And I've done a short piece to do some little example of this. So let's have a listen at this first and see how I managed to create something that feels coherent while doing so many tempo changes. So here's a short song that I've composed for this occasion. It's only like a 30-second song, more or less, and it features a few of the different things that I've been talking about. So about creative tempo change. We see down here the tempo track. We have 100 BPM, 150, back to 100, back to 150, going to 187, and back to 163 for the end. So we'll see later how these different tempos are related, because they are, as you can expect. And we can, as you listen, maybe follow along with this track. So as we do this first listening, I will deactivate the metronome, but pay a close attention to the tempo track down here. You can also follow the different time signatures up here, which are relevant to the different choices I've made in this piece. So let's have a listen first. So let's talk a little bit about the different tempos in the track. So we start at 100. Like in the example, we use 150 here, which is actually the value of the triplet. So if we see this little calculation here, 100 divided by 2, which is the value of the 8 note, multiplied by 3, which is the value of the triplet from the first tempo, equals 150. So this is the example that I've used earlier. And then we go back to 100 and back to 150, and we stay in 150 for a longer time. And now that we've introduced this 150 once, just for this little bar, it feels much more natural to hear it for a longer period of time, and not necessarily for only 5 beats here, like you see. And then the 3/4 here, we go to 187. 187, which is from 150, the value of quintuplets actually. So we do 100 divided by 4, which is the value of the 16 note, multiplied by 5, which is the value of the quintuplets from 150, equals 187. And then the last one, 163, is actually the value of the septuplet from 187. So we slow down to 163 to the last part of the song. Maybe you've noticed here at the beginning, we do a different kind of creative tempo change, maybe a smoother one than the last two we do, because here we introduce the triplet actually. So let's have a listen to the beginning again. So like you hear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, dun, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we hear it before, we feel it before the triplet. It's here in the drum. Pam, ti, ta, pam, pam, ti, pa, pam, pa, da, ti, 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 pam. So when it comes here, we're not so much surprised by it. And we could have left it at 100 and used triplet, but we couldn't have had only these 5 notes, the 5, 8. When you're using triplet, like I said earlier, you're stuck with groups of 3 notes, 6 notes, 9 notes. You have to be in 3. And this is actually the first reason that I used this technique, is because if you want just a group of 5, then you have to do this calculation to bring you the 150, which allows you to present only 5 notes in the value of the triplet of 100 BPM. So this is the way it's done, and I think it's a very smooth creative tempo change just for one measure and just to introduce some odd rhythms in your music. Now the second time it comes around, it's the same riff repeated 2 times. Now here when the 4/4 comes in, we stay on the 150, but instead of only using this group of 5, which make the rhythm feels very flexible and moving, now we go back to 150 and introduce this more constant rhythm with the 4/4 here. And just the fact that we've heard the value of 150 before, this new value of 8 notes, we're not so much surprised here when we stay for a longer time on the 150. Now let's talk about these 2 last tempo changes here. It's a much more abrupt tempo change. Just because we don't hear the value of the tuplet before, it's just we go straight into this new tempo here at 187, which was the value of the quintuplet, and here to 163, which was the value of the septuplet. We don't hear them in these preceding tempos, but it's just a way to give you this access to some different tempos which are related to the preceding tempos. They are related, we just might not hear them, but we might feel it maybe. So let's have a listen to the ending one last time. So also I decided to change in 3/4, which was a 4/4 before, going back to the time signatures at the beginning of the piece. So this creates a link with was there before. So at least that there's continuity throughout the piece. And then there's this ending which brings the piece to a certain finality. I like to slow down rhythms in my endings to present the final chords and to give them some more time. So this was my choice here to use this equivalent of a septuplet to a 16 note here for the ending. So certainly a piece where the first tempo changes, creative tempo changes, are much smoother, and where the ones in the second part of the piece are more abrupt. And of course, it's a short piece. If we develop this into a longer piece, we might have done some other choices. But this was just to show you the different impacts of each of these choices, and how we can make a piece. A piece that feels coherent, that has a lot of tempo changes. So let's have a listen to it one last time. So that's it. I hope that you liked what you listen. It's only, again, a short example that I've composed for this video, but you can hear tons of these tempo changes, creative tempo changes, in my contemporary classical music, as well as in Chronochromy, my progressive metal bands. So I put some links in the description below for some pieces that use this technique if you want to listen to something even more advanced. So there you have it, creative tempo changes. I don't know, maybe you've already used this technique, you maybe have another name for it. So I'm curious to know if this is something that you might want to use. So please let me know. I hope this was helpful, and give a thumbs up to this video. And thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.